In this tutorial, I'll show you how to make this animated confetti animation. So in this tutorial, I'll show you how to create two different variations. We'll be creating this exploding confetti, and then we'll also be creating this other confetti that's just raining down over the video. So you can use this tutorial to add confetti to a 3D scene, or you can do what I'm going to be doing in this video, which is rendering out the images with transparency and then using them as a video overlay. And if you'd like to help support the channel and purchase the project files, you can get that with the links in the description. And when you purchase the project files, you'll get the two different Blender files of the falling confetti and the exploding confetti, so you can use those in your 3D projects. And you'll also get two different videos, which are stock footage, and they have alpha transparency, so you can add those as a video overlay over a video if you want to add them, just like I'm doing in this video. So here I am in a new scene in Blender, and I'm just going to start by deleting everything. And let's go over here to the output properties, and I'm going to change the frame rate to 30 frames per second. I'll be doing this tutorial in 30 frames per second, but if you want to just leave it at 24, you can, that's totally fine. Or if you're adding this on top of the video, like a video overlay, and maybe you're using 60 frames per second, you can just change this to whatever you want, or just leave it at 24. So now let's model the confetti. So you can model lots of different types of confetti, like some square ones. You could model like some star-shaped confetti, or really whatever you want. I'm just going to be modeling some simple square and rectangle confetti pieces. So I'll go to the add menu, let's just add a plane, and I'm going to scale the plane down by a 0.02 and zoom into it, and press Ctrl A and apply the scale. Let's go into edit mode, and I'm going to scale this along the x-axis, and I'll type 3 and then enter. Then I'm going to add some loop cuts, so press Ctrl R, scroll your mouse wheel until there are 3 cuts, and then left click and right click so they stay where they are. So now we'll bring this mesh down on the z-axis, then go to the edge select. We're just going to select this edge and bring it down on the z-axis even more. So now we have a nice curve for the confetti. Let's also save the Blender file, so click on File and Save. And I'm going to save this as exploding confetti, so just click on Save Blender File. Alright, back in object mode, let's use the object context menu and shade it smooth. Also, we'll go back into edit mode and we'll select everything, and I'll just bring everything up on the z-axis so that the origin point is more in the center of the mesh. So I'm going to make 2 more variations now, so I'll duplicate this one more time, drop it here, duplicate it again, and drop it here. So we'll go into edit mode, and for this one here, the third one, I'm going to select these faces, so go to the face select and just select these faces, and we'll just delete the faces. I'll select the face here, and I'll scale it up and bring it over, and then I can scale it on the z-axis by 0, hit enter, so now we just have a square confetti. And then for the second confetti here in the middle, go into edit mode, we're going to select these 2 faces and just delete the faces, and then we'll select these 2 remaining faces, maybe move them over, maybe bring them down, and also scale it up on the z-axis. We can also go to the edge select and just bring this edge down, and then bring it up here so it's about in the center of the origin. So now you can see we have 3 different random confetti pieces. And also just select all of them, press Ctrl A and apply the scale to make sure the scale is applied. So I'm going to select all of these 3 confetti pieces, and I'll hit M, and we will move it to a new collection, and I'm going to call it confetti. So click on create. So now here in the outliner, we now have a confetti collection with all the confetti objects. So I want to do the materials, but first I want to set up some lighting so I can actually see what the objects look like. So I'm going to click over here to go to the world properties, and I'm going to be adding in an HDRI. So I'll click on the yellow dot next to color. I'll choose environment texture, and then I'll open. And I'll be adding in this aerodynamics workshop 1K HDRI from polyhaven.com. Links in the description if you want to download it. So I'll just click on open image, and we can go into the rendered viewport mode. And I am going to be using the cycles rendering engine because I do want it to look as realistic as it can be, but you could also use Eevee if you want to. Alright, so there's the confetti. Let's also here on the render properties, go to the film tab and check mark the transparent button so we just can't see the HDRI. And also right down here in the color management, I'll use AGX as the view transform, and I'll turn the look just to high contrast. Now I also want to add a few lights to kind of add some reflections, so when the confetti is falling it kind of flickers and it kind of reflects off the light. So I'll go to the add menu, let's go to light, and I'll add a sunlight. If we click here to go to the sunlight settings, I'm going to turn the strength up to 5, and I'll rotate one sunlight maybe over here, kind of down looking up like that. And then I'll duplicate the light, and I'll rotate this light over and have one kind of down. So now we have 2 different lights here, so as the confetti is falling, it can kind of reflect those 2 different lights coming in 2 different directions. So now let's create some materials. So I'm going to click right here to go to the shading workspace, and I'll zoom in to the confetti, and we'll just go into the rendered view. Let's add a new material. material. I'll just rename the material to confetti, and let's turn the metallic all the way up to 1. Now there's lots of different types of confetti. Some confetti looks more metallic and shiny. Other confetti is more like a paper material. I'm going to go with more of a shiny metallic confetti. So the metallic is going to be 1, and the roughness I'll turn to like a 0.16. So a 0.16, so it is pretty shiny. Now to make it so the objects randomly have different colors, I'm going to go to the add menu, and I'm going to search for the object info node, and the object info node has this random value. So if we put the random into the base color, it's going to randomly generate each object between black and white. And also let's select each one of the objects here and add the same confetti material. So right now it's just randomly generating different colors from white to black, but then to add random colors, I'm going to search for a color ramp, and we'll put this between the object info and the principal. Now on the linear type here, we can change it to constant, and now I can drag out these tabs and we can make a bunch of different colors. So here's all the different colors that I'm going to make. So to add new tabs, you can hold down the control key and just click right here to add new tabs. And then if you click on the tab and click on the color here, you can drag it around to make it any color you want. So I'm just going to go with a pink, then a dark blue, then a green, a yellow, and then a red, and I'm kind of evenly spacing them. So now every time I duplicate one of the confetti pieces, it's going to randomly have a different color. All right, so let's go back over here to the layout, and I'll zoom out here and I'll go back to the solid view. This confetti group here, I actually want to take the sunlights here and put them into the collection. So just drag them into the collection. So we have this collection here, and this just has the sunlights, and then we have the confetti collection. So let's just click on the check mark just to hide the confetti. So we just have this main collection now. So we now need to create an emitter object, which is going to emit the particles. So I'll go to the add menu, I'm going to go to mesh, and I'm going to add a UV sphere. Now right behind me, if you click on the UV sphere settings, I'm going to turn the segments to 60, and I'm going to turn the rings to 120. So now I'll scale this much smaller, so I'll scale it, and I'll type 0.05, 0.05 and enter, and then press Ctrl A and apply the scale. We can also shade the object smooth. So now let's go to front view by hitting 1 on the numpad, and I'll go into wireframe, and I'll go into edit mode. So I want to delete the rest of the sphere, and I just want to have the top sphere. So I'll deselect everything. I'm going to click here to go to the vertex select, and I'm going to hit B for the box select, and I'll just box select about this many, so just like that, and I'll delete the vertices. So now you can see we have just the top selected. So I'll select the top part and I'll move it down on the z-axis so that it's here in the center. And then I also want to flatten it, so I'll scale it down on the z-axis, and I'm going to type in 0.1 and then enter. Bring it down here into the center. So let's go back to object mode, go back into solid view. Now why I'm doing this, why I'm making a sphere which is kind of detailed and slightly round, is because we're going to have the confetti explode out, and it's going to explode along the normals of the object. So each face has a normal direction, which is the direction that the face is pointing. So by having this slightly round sphere, it's going to kind of explode up all randomly. So we're going to click right over here to go to the particle settings. We'll click on the plus here to add new particles. And if I just hit the space bar to play this, you can see there's just some particles coming out and then falling down. Now, instead of it just having these weird circle particles, I want to instead render the confetti. So let's scroll down here, let's close the emission, and we're going to open up the render tab. And the render as, we're going to change, instead of halo, we're going to change it to collection, or you can just choose object if you have one confetti object. But I'll choose collection, and then here on the instance collection, we're going to choose the confetti. So now if I play this, you can see there's little bits of confetti. Now it's way too small, so let's change the scale. So on the scale here, I'll turn this to 2, and then the scale random, I'll turn it to like a 0.5. So now you can see they're much larger and they all have kind of a random scale. Now let's scroll back up to the top, and we're going to close the render, and we're going to open up the emission. And here on the number, it's set to 1,000, but for the explosion, that's way too many. So I'm just going to render with 100 instead. And then just play this. You can click back here at the starting just to watch them falling down. Now the problem is that they're just coming up by a really small amount and then falling down, but I want them to explode up. So what we're going to do is close the emission, and we're going to open up the velocity here. So on the velocity normal, I'm going to turn this to 7, and the velocity normal is going to make them shoot out by the direction of these objects' faces. So now if I go back to the starting of the timeline and play this, you can see they're shooting out much higher, and that's looking a lot better. Let's also turn this tangent here just to a 1, and the tangent is kind kind of going to give it more of a random and playful feel. So you can see now that I've turned up the tangent, you can see some of them just kind of shoot out in more random directions, and that just makes it look a little bit more playful and random. And also this random here, let's turn the randomized to 2, and then go back to the start and play this, and you can see they're just a bit more random and kind of shoot in random areas. Now I also want to make them randomly rotating because right now they're super flat, so that doesn't look realistic. Let's close the velocity, and we're going to open up the rotation and check mark the rotation. And we're going to turn the randomized to 1 so the rotation is randomized, and then this random phase will turn that all the way up to 2. So now if I go back to the start and play this, you can see they're pretty random, but I want them to also be rotating as the animation is moving. So we're going to check mark the dynamic, and then we also need to open up the angular velocity, and I like to turn this amount up to a 20 for this animation. So again, go back to the starting and play this. What we can actually do is just drag this end frame and drag the end frame to a really small number, like maybe 30 or 50 or something, and now it's just going to kind of replay the animation so we can see how it's looking. So by turning up that angular velocity random, you can see they're kind of spinning around, and also of course make sure you check mark the dynamic button. So now they're nice and random. Now if I turn up this end frame to kind of watch them falling longer, you can see they kind of end right here, and I want them to last a bit longer. And then also I want to make it look like they're exploding. So instead of them all coming out at different times, I want them to all explode out all at once. So let's close the rotation, and we're going to open up the emission here, and you can see there is a frame start and an end, and the frame start and end is going to be the duration of where all of the 100 particles are coming out. So if we turn these to the same number, they're all going to blast out at once. So I'll turn the end to 1. So now all of the 100 particles are blasting out at once. And then also this lifetime here, let's turn the lifetime to 100, and that way they won't go away quite as long. They're going to last longer before they go away. You can see now they're falling a lot farther. Now also if we go into the rendered viewport mode and zoom in here, you can see that little white object. So to hide that, we can close the emission. We're going to open up the viewport display, and we can turn off the show emitter. And that way that little circle there is going to be hidden from the view. So before I render any type of simulation, I like to bake it, just because if you don't bake the animation, then sometimes things get messed up, and sometimes it like stops working while it's rendering. So I think it's always a good idea to bake it. So let's open up the cache here, and we can click on bake just to bake the simulation. And if you want to make the animation longer, you can delete the bake, and on the emission, you can turn this lifetime up longer, and then it'll bake longer. But I can just click bake here, and you can see it's going to bake all the way to like a little past 100 frames. Now for this animation, I've found that just using 55 frames works pretty well. So on this end frame, I'm just going to have it 55, and then it'll just loop between 1 and 55. So now let's add a camera. So I'll go to the add menu. Let's just add a camera. I'll move my view kind of to about here, and I'll press Control Alt Numpad 0 to bring the camera to where we are. And if you select the camera, you can hit G to grab, kind of move the camera around. To move the camera back, you can hit G, and then you can hit the Z key twice to move the camera back. So now just play through this, and you can move the camera around and just find a good spot. So I want the confetti to kind of explode right here, just underneath the camera, just barely out of the camera view. And I want the camera to pretty much encompass all of the confetti, and then at the very end it's just going to fall out. So that's looking pretty good. Let's go into the rendered view, see how that's looking. So you can of course just add this into a 3D render if you're doing some sort of 3D scene, but I'm going to be using this as a video overlay on top of the video. So to do that, I'm going to render these out as individual frames, and I'm going to render them with alpha transparency. So let's go here to the output properties, and on the file format, I'm going to use PNG, and then here on the color, I'm going to use RGBA. That stands for red, green, blue, and alpha. So it'll render the transparency in the background. And then also on the output here, let's click on this folder. And here in my project files, I will make a new folder. I'll rename this to Exploding Frames, go into the folder, and then click on the Accept button. And then another thing we can do, which will make the animation look a lot better, is if you go here to the render properties, you can turn on the motion blur. And if I just give this a quick render, you can see the motion blur is really going to make it look more realistic. Now let's also close this, and we are going to open up the sampling, and I'm going to render this with 100 samples, and I'll also turn on the denoise. So 100 samples should be plenty. You could probably render it with less, but I'll just render it with 100 samples. And since most of the image is just transparent, it'll render really quite fast. You can see if I just give this a render here, it's going to render in less than 2 seconds. So just press Ctrl S to save the project and then click on render and render the animation. And once the frames have rendered, you can just open up Blender's video editor and you can add in some sort of video. Now also here on the frame rate, I chose 30 frames per second for the confetti animation. So I just use 30. Normally I film my videos in 60 frames per second. So this video is actually 60 frames per second, but I'm going to change it to 30 just for this video. So now what I'll do is press Shift A and I'll go to Image Sequence. Just locate to the folder where you render the frames, hit the A key to select all the frames and click on Add Image Strip, and then you can just hit G to grab and move the image strip right up here, and there we go, we now have the confetti animation. So I can duplicate it by pressing Shift D, and you can see we now have a nice video overlay over our video. So now back in the original Blender file with the confetti, I'm going to show you how to turn this into a different animation where the confetti is falling down. So first I'm going to save the Blender file as a different file, so I'll click on File, and Save As. And this one I'll call Falling Confetti and click on Save As. So let's go back into solid view, and what I want to do is select the original object and we'll go into edit mode and I'll select the mesh and click X, and we're just going to delete the vertices. So now I'll go to the add menu and we're going to add a plane. So this plane is added in the same object's edit mode. So if I go back to object mode and then play this, you can see it's still in the same object. And I'm going to go back into the camera view and I'll scale this up a bit bigger, and I'll also scale it out on the X-axis to make it longer. And then I can bring it up on the Z-axis. And then also we're going to have the confetti exploding out by the direction of the face. And so the top of the face is actually up here. So what I'm going to do in edit mode is rotate the face on the X-axis, actually the Y-axis, and I'll type 180 for 180 and hit enter. So now the top of the face is actually going to be down here. So then the confetti will blast out on the bottom instead of the top. Now to actually see it happening, we need to go back here to the particles and we need to click on delete bake, and then we're going to have to rebake it. So just click on bake again, and now you can see it's just coming down like that. But I'll just click on delete bake because I just want to be able to see it updating when I play it. And if you want to get rid of the bake in the timeline, you can go into edit mode and just like scale the plane and then go back to object mode. And now when I play this, it should be adapting. So it should rebake it whenever I play the animation. So this is going to be a longer animation. So on the end frame here, I'm going to turn this to 250. And then I also want many more particles, not just 100. So let's close the cache and we'll open up the emission here. And on the emission, let's turn the number up to like 1,000. That's going to be a lot better. So we have a lot more of them. And then also what we need to do is go here to the lifetime and let's turn this to 200 because I want it to be a longer animation. So we'll change that to 200. Now they're all coming out of the object all at once. So what we're going to do is change this end frame. Let's also turn the end frame just to 200 for now, but we might change that later. So now you can see between frame 0 and frame 200, they're all going to be coming out of the plane. Now they're falling down way too fast, so I want to slow it down. So we'll close the emission and we're going to open up the velocity instead. And this tangent here, I'm going to turn this to 0. And then this normal here, I'm going to turn this way down to just a 1. So now if I play this, they're going to be a lot slower. Now I still want them to be moving around so they look a bit more random, but not quite as random. So I'll turn this randomized down to just 1. So if I turn the randomized to 0, they're just going to all fall straight down, and that doesn't look very realistic. So just by turning the randomized to 1, they're going to be a little bit more random and they kind of act a little more playful, and it just looks a bit nicer. Now they're still moving a bit too fast, so to make it slower, we can slow down the gravity. So let's close the velocity. We can open up the field weights, and on this gravity, I'll turn this to like a 0.05. So now if I play this, you can see they're falling quite a bit slower. Now I want all of the particles to fall all the way down, and then by the end of the frames at 250, I want all the particles to be gone. So let's close the field weights, and we need to make all the particles falling down sooner. So we'll open up the emission, and on this end here, let's go with like 130. That should be pretty good. So now if I go back to the starting here and play this, we can actually just open up the cache here and hit bake just to bake this. And now if we go to the very end, you can see there's still like one more falling down. So let's delete the bake. And what we need to do is change the end frame maybe to like 115 instead. So let's try 115 and click bake again. And now if I play this, I just want to make sure that they all have fallen out of the animation. So now you can see just here at the very end of the animation, the last one just falls out of the frame. So they're all gone by frame 250. So just make sure you bake the animation before we render it. So let's again add a folder that we can bake these frames to. So I'll go to the output properties and I will click on this file icon. This time in my project files, I will make a new folder and I'll just call this falling frames, and I'll go into the folder and then click on the accept button. And then of course we're going to render this to PNG. We're going to render it as RGBA, so it stores the alpha transparency. And then of course over here on the render settings, we're using the render samples of 100. We're using the denoise. We're also using the motion blur, so it adds just a bit of motion blur. And also the film is set to transparent, so the background is transparent. So just press Ctrl S to save the file again, and then click on render and render the animation. And once the animation is finished rendering, you can go back to your video editing file, hit Shift A and add image or sequence, and just go into the new folder, so the falling frames, hit the A key to select all the frames, and click on add image strip. And now I can play this and you can see we have some nice confetti raining down over our video. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. And if you'd like to help support the channel, a great way to do that is by purchasing the project files. You can get that with the links in the description. And another great way to help support the channel monthly is by joining my Patreon page. So if you join my Patreon page, you'll be helping to support the channel each month, and you can get access to lots of different Blender content like 3D models and assets, tutorial files, artwork project files, procedural materials, geometry node modifier setups, and lots more Blender content. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching.